MISI it means mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. And it means that whenever you go down in the tree and break it apart, each of the parts below something above, if you have a governing thought at the top, and then you have parts below, then these parts below, they should be mutually exclusive, meaning they should not be overlapping at all. If you think about like a Venn diagram, they should be separated out. And they should be collectively exhaustive, meaning that these two together should make up for the whole thing above them. So it's basically a way of creating a taxonomy. If you think about the animal world, it's perfectly MISI, the thing created by Carl von Linné, where everything on top is split out and all the parts below cover everything above, and then you do the same thing again. And this is more of an art than a science, and it's something you need to revisit and work with. There's a really good book by Barbara Minto called The Pyramid Principle. It's called Logic and Thinking and Writing, but I think this really makes sense. Is when you approach it and you break it down and find a good way to create a structure that is MISI and is also insightful, in that the way you broke it down reflects what is also the most relevant part. And then the question is like, why should you try to work with being MISI? And then it's really, really powerful, because as you add a lot of stuff, here we will come and talk about opportunities in a while. And it's like things that customers have as problems. That's going to be like easily, if you have all these interviews on a weekly basis, you're going to have 100 opportunities, and nobody can handle a list of 100. So you just drown. Like, I don't remember the rule. I think a human mind can handle a list of is it 5 or 7 plus minus 2 or something like this. So if you're genius, you can handle 9 maybe, and everybody can understand a list of 3. So you have that some kind of range, and so whenever you go above 5, it's a problem. So you need to kind of group things and go like, okay, wait a minute, we have 7 here. Maybe we can group some of them. Oh yeah, these two kind of stick together. Oh, how would we articulate what's above them? Oh, both of these are actually like this. Okay, bring them down, pull this one up, and you work with this structure. And that way you can have a structure that kind of covers what you're working with. And the cool thing is that even if you can only handle roughly 5 objects in a list, you can handle a lot more if you structure them in lists that are grouped by list in a tree like this. So the human mind is really powerful when it comes to thinking about these types of structures, but much more weak when it comes to long lists. So it's a way for you to structure your thinking and to get much more engagement and get people on board and make them understand and kind of to drive the work forward. So being MISI is a super powerful skill, and I really encourage you to work with it. Okay, so that's what is MISI and why is it relevant. One thing that's also relevant to if you go back to this is about credibility and being structured and logical. Here, another thing that's important to be structured and logical is about the different layers of the tree and not mixing them up. Being clear, like what is the goal layer? Here in the goal layer, we're a little bit egocentric. We talk about business outcomes. We talk about product outcomes, but product outcomes are like changing the behavior of users in a way that's good for us. So the outcome layers is a little bit egocentrical. It's about goals that you are working towards. The next layer is the opportunity layer. Here, you really think about the customer outcome. What do the customer want to do? What's their world? What are the steps that they go through in their work? And what are the problems they have in each of these? And what are the things they want to accomplish? So really understanding the user in this layer. And then the next layer down, you go like, okay, now this is a problem, the user. What are the different ways we could help them with this? And then you get the solutions. And then an experiment is something that's not valuable in itself, but it's a way to test assumptions on solutions. Or you could also test assumptions on opportunities as well. But usually it's testing assumptions about solutions. So another way to gain credibility when you go into meetings with stakeholders is to have really distinct communication around these different layers. Because that gives you, again, an aura of having like structured and logical thinking. Another thing that's really valuable to know is that you won't get this structure right the first time. So you need to work with it. You have like an opportunity solution tree. Quite early on, get the hypothesis, run it with users. Does this make sense with the users? And run it with stakeholders. And they say, oh, but I think it's really important that this. And you go like, okay, this doesn't fit anywhere. Okay, I need to restructure it so it fits. And then you cook with users and they go, I think this is a really big problem. You're like, with this problem, does it fit? No, it doesn't. You restructure it again and work with it. So it's really an iterative process into coming in with a good structure that is meaty and insightful. And I think it's relevant to think about both words. Meaty is like a formal requirement almost. You won't have a 100% meaty, but you can get quite far. But insightful is something different. Insightful means that when the leadership look at this, they look at it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. These are the 5 things, or these are the 3 things that it's about. Oh, and this, oh yeah, it makes sense. This constitutes of these things. So working with both kind of the meaty requirements and the insightful requirement is really relevant, and iterating towards that. And then one thing to know is like, as you continue to work, maybe in the beginning you have something that breaks down and it's like a couple of different opportunities and solutions, but then you go more and more and more. And like you said, in a while you have like 100 different insights that you work with. It becomes really big. Then it's really important that you have a good structure where you can iterate and try out new things and restructure it and work. So that in the end you have like a really good structure. So when you come in with this to the stakeholders and you collapse it up and go from the top down, they'll be like, yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, this makes sense. And you can kind of communicate this kind of structured thinking and a structured approach. Then you will gain a lot of credibility as being like a structured thinker, which will give you a lot of trust. So that's the credibility part. But then you can have all the structure and logic in the world. If at the end of this there's air, then it's like a house of cards that just collapses, because then they go down. And how do you know this? You go like, I don't know. Then you're screwed. So that's why reliability is so important to back it up, and that you can do with the user research and becoming the expert of the user. This is key here. I think there's a cool quote by Jeff Patton. He says, when I behave like a waiter, customer tells me what they want and I need to work it out and get it to them. A doctor's job is to solve problems, not to do what you want. I think this is a trap that a lot of PMs fall into. They're like going from this push feedback where customers say, I want this, I want this, I want this. And you go like, oh, they want all these things. I need to prioritize them and detail them out. Whereas if you kind of change it around and you go like, this is my goal, but what are the real problems here? And then you, instead of just accepting all the insights or ideas you get, you go like, okay, but what's beneath this? And you go in and you try to be more of a doctor than a waiter and try to figure out what's really the problem here, not just accepting the solution. Then you have a lot to win. And this corresponds in the PM process to, of course, you still need to work with feedback, but to a little bit shift emphasis to do, instead of just getting push feedback, do pull feedback with deep interviews where you really try to figure out what's going on. So that's something I really encourage. And then as you do this, as you pull out the layer, it's a good thing to look for opportunities. So this is what Teresa Torres talks about. She has this concept of an opportunity. I like it. It's basically a problem, desire, need, or want of a user. And it needs to be linked to a product outcome above. So you can't just say, I have a problem with this. If it doesn't relate to a goal that you're trying to work towards, it's not that relevant for you at the moment. Not in this context. And the other one is that these need to be from the user perspective. When I coach PMs, I see a lot of opportunities that are like, it would be great if we could get more people to do X. That's an outcome. And then you have like a goal breakdown. That's good too. But the really important thing is before you go from goal breakdown to solution, you inject this middle layer of really understanding what's the problem of the user. And so an opportunity is not the business goal and it's not the feature. It's something that one good litmus test is, could you imagine a customer saying this? Like, it's annoying to have to keep track of my passwords. That's possible that the user said. Increase visit to sign up ratio. That no customer would say that. maybe a customer would say solution, but then maybe I would like single sign-on maybe. But so you can't really use that to differentiate from solutions, but to differentiate from outcomes, I think it's really good test. Could they say it? Cool. So looking for this middle layer is what we're going to talk about more. And to get there, really important is to get the keystone habit of interviewing users all the time on a weekly basis is really more powerful. And then you can have this iteration where you have an idea how it looks like, interview somebody, make a change, think about it a little bit more, interview again, make a change, and iterate towards a really good structure you will get. And so to get here, you need basically, you need to get approval to talk with users. For some PMs, this is no problem, but for some PMs, this is a real struggle, and then you need to work with it. It's not for free for all. So you need to nudge them, maybe sit in with the customer support and have their call, be on their calls, and really get there, because you need to get here. Otherwise, you will only get push feedback. To get to pull feedback, you need to have yourself in a meeting where you can go, oh, wait a minute, but what about that? And then sourcing interviews is the next thing. So in a breakout, there was one in my breakout had the problem of being like a business to customer, where like they're far removed from the actual users. They don't have access to the users. Then it's hard, but it's still really important to get to what the users want. And then you have to get creative, do guerrilla recruiting, or maybe figure stuff out to make sure that you have interviews coming in. Because if you don't, you won't be able to do it. And then the last thing is like to establish a frequency where this happens repeatedly over time. And then, because then you can really get the machinery going. Cool. And then when you have these interviews, it's an art, not a science. You can't say this is exactly how you're going to do it. But one thing that's always really powerful is if you have a good product goal at the top, then that is about changing a particular behavior that the user does. And then you could zone in on that behavior and go, okay, when you do this behavior that I want to change, what are the steps that you go through? How does it work? Okay. And then you really focus in on that. And then you keep drilling and you kind of walk them through this process that they go through. And you go, oh, why do you do that? How does that work? Okay, but why did you do that? Okay, why it's that? Oh, I get it. Oh, but how do you do this? And really figuring out and be curious into figuring out what's going on. Because that's the way, if you switch side and you go into the discussion with the stakeholders again, and you have like, this is the goal, these are the user problems, and like this is really what they want. This is a problem they're having. And if the stakeholders ask, yeah, but why don't they just do this? You go, actually, they don't do this because this and that. We heard it several times. It's a good question. I also asked it. To really become the expert, you need to drill down a lot. Cool. Now we can take a step back and say, what are the risks now? What needs to happen? We covered a little bit of the components of trust. Intimacy, we put out on scope, but of course, relationship is also super important. Starting from the bottom, like we did before, self-orientation. Key risks here is not having aligned on business and product goal. If you don't have alignment on that, the rest is going to fall. The second one is not having aligned on kind of guardrails, like what are the parameters that we need to adhere to or address, and figuring out like are we in the right frame of mind here? Is this how you think about it? To ask the executives. If they go, yeah, this is how I think about it, then you're good. Another one is to have too long feedback loops, because if you ask something, they go, yeah, that makes sense. And then you work for a really long time, you come back, maybe it has moved quite a bit and you didn't quite get it. So by having tight loops, you can make sure that they won't be surprised. One good rule here is like, if a stakeholder is surprised by what you have worked on in a negative way, no, wait, this is not what I thought about it. Then you have detracted from trust, from lack of for too much self-orientation. You thought about it, this is how I want to do it, this makes sense for me. You forgot to really anchor it with them with tight feedback loops. Okay, that's self-orientation. The next one is this credibility. One trap here is unclear distinctions between outcomes, opportunities, and solutions. Be really explicit. This is our goal. This is what the user needs. This is a potential solution. The next one is to have like you not being messy in your structure. If somebody says, yeah, but this thing, doesn't that belong here or doesn't it belong there? It's easy. This is something that came up in a call in our breakout. I think like it's often the case that the solution comes up in several places. Maybe that it can be, but often you can work around it by really thinking about what's really the problem here, what's really the problem here, to have like a super solid structure so they agree with all the breakdown going on. And then last thing on credibility is like it's a spell in some way. They come in, and if you're like have a super tight logic, then you don't want to break that spell and lose credibility. So you want to avoid any like sloppy logic or wrong spellings or anything like that. Try to be impeccable. Like this is going to be super tight, and they come in and they're like a little bit blown away. So basically it's to the point where if they agree with the goal and then this logic is so tight, so they have to agree with it, and then at the bottom they have to go into reliability, and then the core thing is like if you don't know what the users want, that's a problem. That's why you need to talk with them. And the next trap is being unable to refer to why or have a quote or know the observation, who said it, and so forth. So it's really important that as you do this work to have like good references, like who said what, where did this come from? Actually, it's 5 people that said it, and they work on this and these companies. Because if they scratch the surface and you go, yes, this and this said it, then they're going to be impressed, and you're going to build trust again. So having like your references in order is really powerful. Okay, next one. So like here a goal is like you should come to a session with stakeholders where you prioritize an opportunity solution tree. That's like it's a key moment in time that's important to think about ahead. And so when you do that, before you do this, you should walk in with the best opportunity solution tree you can have. You will iterate many times, so it's not going to be perfect, but it needs to be tight and good. Good structure, aligned outcome, and with good observations thus far, so to speak. And it's also good to have a hypothesis for what you think should be the priority opportunity, as well as having some alternatives. So if they don't agree with you, there should be a route for that as well. And then it's important to position this. Here's always a struggle when people start from scratch and they have never been allowed to work with the goals or problems, but just features. Then a nice way to kind of lower the hurdle is to say, what we're going to do now is we're going to prioritize the discovery effort of the team. Of course, we're still going to put a lot of delivery effort on these features that we have agreed on, but we're now going to carve out a little bit of effort to think about the goals and the problems. That's why we're here. Let's look at it, and I structure and go like that. And then when you do it, when you get into the actual session, it's really good to collapse it up and step down in the tree, because that gives you that allows you to bring them along for the journey really in a really good way. So first up, just show the outcome. You say, this is what we agreed on, right? And they go, yes, this is what we said. Okay, give me more. And then you just expand one more level down and say, for this to happen, we have identified these different parts. These are the 3 to 5 parts that really make up this. Would you agree with that? They go, oh, let me think a bit about it. And then you have a discussion. Maybe there's another part. Maybe it's, but then you have that discussion, and then you drill down and expand more parts about the tree. So this problem that users have, it's actually 2 or 3 different sub problems. And then you can also drill down and say, for this sub problem, we actually heard it 3 times, and it's these different ways they said it, and you can really back up reliability here. And then at the end of it, you come like a discussion. You say, what I think is we should focus on this opportunity now. This is the most important thing for us to solve right now, and I want us to focus. Would you agree? If you get to the point where the meeting concludes in a decision that it's okay for you to focus on this particular problem, then that's success.